A well-trained local army was trained and ready for action. Petraeus had the time he needed to stand up a 500,000-man local army and then won the war. This has also been his model for Afghanistan. While Iraq and Afghanistan differ, the military challenge was the same: to train and deploy a local army that could sustain a fight until victory. Now, starting with nothing, the United States and our NATO allies set a goal of building an Afghan army and police force to eventually number 400,000. By reaching this goal, the combat mission of the U.S. and other NATO forces would disappear. We would remain helpful with supplies, repair, and intelligence, but not frontline combat. I agreed with President Obama's decision to surge to Afghanistan, and I was in the audience to show my support when he delivered a historic address at West Point. By following the recommendations of General Petraeus, Secretary Gates, and others, President Obama gave the U.S. and our NATO allies the time needed to vastly expand the Afghan police and army. Unfortunately, the President has changed course from establishing a sufficient Afghan security force before scaling down our military presence. To date, the Afghan police and army are short of their 400,000-man goal. As of April, there were 284,000 in both services, well over 100,000 people short. Overall, the Afghan army loses 32% of its personnel a year, while its police lose 23%. To expand the security forces, losses must be held to just 24% annually. Therefore, according to our National Military Training Mission Afghanistan, the commander of that training effort, General Caldwell, must train 23 Afghans for every 10 to be deployed. We find key shortfalls in the officer corps and among non-commissioned officers. To date, 82% of Afghan officer billets are not filled, along with 85% of non-commissioned sergeants and corporals. The Afghan army is also short of recruits from the communities where the fighting is most difficult. Only 3% of the Afghan army was born in the southern Pashtun regions where Afghan leaders traditionally originate. The Afghan army is also lacking in literacy. In 2008, only 14% of Afghan military personnel could read or write. Now, thanks to General Caldwell, that number has grown to 85% in both police and army. One of the critical factors in training an Afghan army that can win this war is the number of NATO trainers. To date, the training command lacks over 700 trainers due to personnel shortfalls among our NATO allies. Each of these facts paints a clear picture of a work in progress, but one that is about to be strained by the President's decision to leave Afghanistan 2 years too early. Under the original Petraeus plan, the United States and NATO would have deployed an Afghan police and military numbering 400,000 by 2014. Having trained together for a year or more, these Afghan units would likely endure the stress of combat and deliver victory in 2015 or 2016. Unfortunately, the President has rejected his general's recommendation and decided to leave early, withdrawing one U.S. brigade combat team right away. Our NATO allies expressed quiet concern about this departure. U.S. and local commanders will have about 12% of their combat power taken off the battlefield right away. The President will then remove 2 more brigade combat teams by the election day in 2012, leaving U.S. and local commanders with only 66% of the current combat power. These actions will severely strain the Afghan police and army, just as Afghanistan prepares for a new presidential election. It also provides some hope for the Taliban, whose strategy may be a 12-month rest and refit of their operations to then re-enter the battlefield against a much weaker enemy in 2013. We learned a painful lesson when we ignored Afghanistan in 1992. Without any domestic oil or a coastline, the United States paid no attention to the rise of the Taliban and al-Qaeda. And we paid an awful price for that policy on September 11th, 2001. In my view, the lesson of that day should move us to realize that the Petraeus plan should have been fully implemented and not ended early. Now, separate